I never thought a stranger's handwritten note would be the thing that saved my life. It was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind where the sky sits low and gray over everything, and you feel the cold before you even open the front door. I was standing at the kitchen counter, drinking my second cup of coffee, watching the backyard where my wife Eleanor used to plant her tomatoes every spring. The garden had gone wild since she passed, 18 months, and I still hadn't touched it. My name is Walter. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years building a commercial roofing company from nothing, 2 trucks, 1 employee, and a lot of early mornings into something that employed 43 people and covered half the industrial buildings in the greater Cincinnati area. When I sold it 2 years ago, I did well. Better than well. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because that number, that sale, is what started everything that came after. Eleanor was sick when we closed the deal. Pancreatic cancer moves fast, and it doesn't negotiate. She lived 8 more months after the diagnosis. Long enough to see the money in the account. Long enough to hold my hand and say, "Walter, please don't become one of those men who sits in a big house alone and turns bitter." She knew me too well. She always did. After she was gone, I tried. I really did. I called my son more. I accepted dinner invitations I would have declined before. I even agreed, that October, to let my nephew stay with me for a few weeks while he was between apartments. His name was Derek. He was 34, my younger brother's boy, and we'd always gotten along well enough at holidays and family gatherings. He was charming the way some people are effortlessly charming, good at listening, good at remembering small details, the kind of person who makes you feel like the most interesting man in the room. I told myself it would be good. Company in the house. A reason to cook a real dinner instead of eating cereal standing over the sink. Derek arrived with 2 bags and a bottle of bourbon as a house gift, and within a week the place felt warmer. He helped me fix the fence gate I'd been ignoring. He sat with me through a long Sunday afternoon football game and didn't check his phone every 5 minutes the way most people his age do. He asked me about Eleanor, genuinely, and listened when I talked about her. I let my guard down. That's the honest truth of it. I let my guard down completely. About 3 weeks into his stay, Derek started bringing up the estate. It started small, casual. The way these things always do, I think, when someone has been planning it carefully. He mentioned over dinner one night that he'd run into a financial advisor who had some interesting ideas about asset protection. I didn't think much of it. Eleanor had handled most of our financial planning, and since her death I'd been muddling through with my regular accountant, a man named Phil who had done my business taxes for 20 years. Phil was fine. He wasn't exciting, but I trusted him. A few nights later, Derek mentioned a name. A man called Raymond, who was apparently some kind of estate specialist. He helped my friend's family save a lot on taxes after their dad passed, Derek said, passing me the salt. Might be worth just having a conversation. I said maybe. I wasn't really paying attention. There was a game on. The next week, Derek asked if Raymond could come by the house. Just informally. Just to chat. I said sure. I wasn't concerned. I was lonely, and having people in the house still felt like a courtesy to Eleanor's memory. Raymond arrived on a Wednesday evening. He was 50-ish, trim, wore a suit that fit too well for a casual meeting, and had the particular kind of smooth confidence that I had seen in salespeople my entire career. He shook my hand, complimented my house, and within 20 minutes had laid out what he called a legacy preservation strategy that involved transferring a substantial portion of my assets into a trust structure he managed. I asked questions. I thought they were good questions. Raymond had answers for all of them, fluid and reassuring. Derek sat beside him and nodded at the right moments. At the end of the evening, Raymond left a folder of documents and said there was no rush. Take my time. Look it over. I put the folder on the kitchen table and didn't open it for 2 days. What changed everything was a Tuesday morning, 9 days after Raymond's visit. I had a routine back then. I walked to the coffee shop 4 blocks away every morning, sat at the same corner table, read the paper for 45 minutes. It got me out of the house. Eleanor had started that habit in me during the months she was sick, when she knew I needed structured reasons to leave her side so I wouldn't exhaust myself. I was putting on my jacket when I heard my phone buzz on the counter. A text from a number I didn't recognize. No name, just 7 words. Don't sign anything Raymond gives you, please. I stood there for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. I told myself it was a wrong number, or spam, or something meaningless. But it sat with me all through my walk and all through my coffee. By the time I got home, I had read it 4 more times. That night, Derek asked if I'd looked at Raymond's documents. I said I was still reviewing them. He nodded and said Raymond had a second meeting scheduled for Thursday, just to go over any questions. I said that was fine. I called Phil that evening, my accountant. I read him the names on the documents, described the trust structure the way I understood it. Phil was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Walter, I don't recognize this firm. Let me look into it before you sign anything." I told him about the text message. Another silence. "Good," he said finally. "Listen to the text." Phil called me back the next morning. The firm Raymond represented had been registered in Delaware 18 months ago. It had one listed director. The address on the registration was a mail forwarding service. There was no verifiable track record, no regulatory filings, nothing. I sat down at the kitchen table with that information, and I looked at the folder Raymond had left, and for the first time I let myself understand what I had been refusing to see. I thought about Derek. The bourbon as a house gift, the fence gate, the Sunday afternoons, how carefully constructed the warmth had been, in hindsight. How precisely timed each conversation about Raymond had arrived, just far enough apart to feel casual. I thought about Eleanor saying, "Don't become bitter." I was trying very hard to honor that, but there is a difference between bitterness and clarity. I didn't say anything to Derek. That was the hardest part, sitting across from him at dinner that night, watching him talk about some television show he'd been watching, acting exactly as I had been acting for 3 weeks. Comfortable, trusting, present. Inside, I was working through what I knew and what I still needed to understand. The next morning, I called my attorney. Her name is Catherine, and she has handled my legal work for 15 years. A sharp, methodical woman who does not alarm easily. When I told her everything, the documents, Raymond, Derek, the text message, she was quiet for a long moment and then said, "Walter, I want you to bring me everything and come in today. Don't discuss this with Derek. Don't indicate anything has changed." I drove to her office that afternoon. Catherine reviewed Raymond's documents for an hour while I sat across from her desk and drank bad coffee from a paper cup. When she looked up, her expression was careful and controlled the way it gets when the news is serious. This document, if signed, would transfer power of attorney over your investment accounts to this trust structure, she said. Raymond would have discretionary authority. You would have limited ability to reverse it for the first 24 months. She paused. Walter, if these accounts were liquidated or transferred during that window, recovering the funds would be very difficult and potentially very costly. The number of dollars involved was significant, the kind of significant that would have changed everything. My retirement, my house, what I had planned to leave for my son and his children. I asked Catherine about the text message. She said she wanted to look into it. I gave her the number. She called me the following morning. "The number is registered to a woman named Patricia Odom," Catherine told me. "She works as a paralegal at a firm downtown. I reached out to her through professional channels." A pause. "She says she knows Raymond. She's worked adjacent to cases involving him before. She says she saw Derek's name come up in a context that concerned her, found your name, and took a risk. A stranger, a woman I had never met, who owed me nothing, had taken a risk on my behalf because she thought it was the right thing to do." I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. Catherine advised me to contact the Financial Crimes Unit of the local FBI field office. I did. They asked me to come in. I brought everything, the documents, the text records, my communications with Derek, Phil's research on the firm. I sat in a plain conference room for 2 hours with 2 agents who asked careful, methodical questions and gave very little away in their expressions. Before I left, one of them said, "Mr. Gaines, we're going to ask you to proceed normally for now. Keep the Thursday meeting with Raymond. Don't alter your behavior with your nephew. Can you do that?" I said I could. Walking back to my car in the Federal Building parking lot, I thought about Eleanor again, about what she would say if she could see this. She had always been more perceptive about people than I was. She had met Derek maybe a dozen times over the years and had never said anything directly negative about him. But I remembered once, years ago, after a Christmas dinner, she had said quietly as we were washing dishes. That boy watches people very carefully, Walter, more than he listens. I had not understood what she meant at the time. I understood it now. Thursday arrived. I made sure I was home, dressed as I normally would be, sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee when Derek brought Raymond through the front door. Raymond set his briefcase on the kitchen table, shook my hand with the same practiced warmth, and opened the folder. I asked questions. Real ones this time, technical ones, the kind Catherine had coached me to ask. Raymond answered smoothly. Derek occasionally added something, filling silences, steering. They were good at it. It was an impressive performance. Near the end, Raymond slid the signature page across the table and said, "I think we're in a good place, Walter. Ready to move forward?" I looked at the page. I thought about Eleanor's garden going wild in the backyard. I thought about a paralegal named Patricia who didn't know me and sent a text anyway. I thought about 31 years of early mornings building something. I said, "Give me until Monday. I want one more read-through." Raymond smiled. No hesitation. Of course. Take your time. They left together. I locked the front door and called Catherine. The following Monday morning, I told Derek I was going to the attorney's office to review some documents and would be back by noon. That was true. What I didn't tell him was that the FBI had been conducting a broader investigation for the past 4 days, that Raymond had 2 prior complaints in other states under different business names, and that Derek had been in contact with Raymond for nearly 8 months, long before he ever asked to stay with me. I was at Catherine's office when she got the call. Raymond had been taken into custody that morning at his home. The trust structure had been used in at least 3 prior cases. 2 elderly individuals in other cities had lost substantial assets before the pattern was identified. Derek was arrested at my house at 10:40 in the morning. The officers knocked on the front door. He was still in his bathrobe. I didn't go home until early afternoon. The house was quiet. Derek's 2 bags were still in the guest room. The bourbon bottle, still on the kitchen counter, was about 2/3 empty. I stood in the kitchen for a while, not doing anything in particular. Then I went out to Eleanor's garden and I sat on the old bench she kept back there, the one that needed repainting. And I stayed out there until the gray October sky started going dark. The weeks that followed were administrative and exhausting in the way legal processes always are. I worked with the FBI and with Catherine. I gave statements. I reviewed records. I learned more about Raymond's methods than I ever wanted to know. I learned that Derek had been in financial trouble for nearly 2 years, a combination of poor investments and debts he hadn't told anyone about. I don't think that explains what he did, but it helps me understand it, which is not the same thing. Raymond was charged with wire fraud and elder financial exploitation. Derek was charged with conspiracy. The federal prosecutor was thorough and experienced and told me plainly that the evidence was strong. In the months between the arrest and the resolution, I did something I had not expected to do. I wrote Derek a letter, not to forgive him, not yet, maybe not ever, in the full sense of that word, but to tell him that I had loved his father, my brother, genuinely, and that I was choosing to carry that separately from what Derek had done, that those were 2 different things and I intended to keep them that way. I don't know if he read it. I don't know if it meant anything to him, but I needed to write it for myself, and Eleanor would have understood that. Patricia Odom, the paralegal who sent the text, agreed to meet me for coffee about 3 months after everything concluded. She was in her 40s, straightforward, a little awkward about the whole thing in the way genuinely decent people often are when they've done something good. She said she'd seen Raymond's name in documents at her firm years before, in the background of a case that never quite came together, and something had stuck with her. When she'd seen Derek's name and done some searching and found mine, she'd spent 2 days deciding whether to say anything. She thought probably no one would listen. She sent the text anyway. I thanked her properly. I mean that. I thanked her the way you thank someone who walked into your burning house for no reason that benefited themselves. She said, "I just figured someone should know." That's the whole sentence. Someone should know. 7 words, same as her text. I've thought about those words more than she probably realizes. Raymond was sentenced to 11 years. Derek received 32 months and is serving it now. He will come out changed in ways I can't predict and won't pretend to. What happens after that is not something I can control. What I can control is this. I had my attorney update my estate documents properly, with full transparency, with my son listed clearly, with no gaps for anyone to step into. I hired a financial advisor, Catherine recommended, someone with 20 years of verifiable work and not a single complaint. I started a small foundation in Eleanor's name that gives scholarship money to nursing students, because she always said nurses were the people who actually held things together. And I repainted the bench in the backyard. I cleaned up the garden. I didn't replant the tomatoes, that was Eleanor's thing, not mine, but I cleared the weeds and put in some simple ground cover that doesn't need much attention. It looks better now, tidy, cared for. That matters more than it sounds like it does. I think about what Eleanor said often. Don't become one of those men who sits in a big house alone and turns bitter. I'm trying. Some days are easier than others. But I'll tell you what I know for certain now. On the other side of all of it, the warmth that is real feels different from the warmth that is performed. It took me longer than it should have to learn that difference, but I learned it. And that, at 67 years old, in a house that is quieter than I would like, but still mine, still standing, still paid for by 31 years of honest work, that is something. That is something no one can transfer out of your account.